There was a time when respect between husband and wife was considered sacred, when dignity in marriage mattered above all else. When the Thompson family walked onto the Family Feud stage in September 2024, everyone expected the usual laughter and friendly competition. But what happened when David Thompson began belittling his wife Sarah in front of millions of viewers would test Steve Harvey's patience like never before. What Steve did next left the studio audience shocked, the husband speechless, and proved that sometimes standing up for what's right means calling out wrong behavior, no matter who it embarrasses. If you believe marriage should be built on mutual respect and dignity, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about standing up for what's right. ACT 2. Character Setup. 45 seconds 4 minutes. Sarah Thompson was 42 years old, a woman who had spent the last 20 years building a life with her husband David. She had raised their 3 children while working part-time as a librarian in their small Ohio town. Her warm smile and gentle nature had made her beloved in their community, where she volunteered at the local food bank and organized reading programs for underprivileged children. Sarah had always been the kind of person who put others first, who made everyone around her feel valued and heard. Her husband David, 45, worked in middle management at a manufacturing company. He had always been the kind of man who needed to be in control, who measured his worth by being right and making sure everyone knew it. Over the years of their marriage, his need to be the smartest person in the room had grown into something darker. What had once been confidence had slowly transformed into condescension, especially towards Sarah. In private, he would correct her constantly, dismiss her opinions, and make her feel small. But she had hoped that on national television, in front of millions of people, he would show her the respect she deserved. The Thompson family stood on the Family Feud stage alongside their adult children and Sarah's sister. They were competing against the Rodriguez family from Texas, a warm and boisterous group who were clearly enjoying every moment of the experience. Steve Harvey bounded onto the stage with his characteristic energy, ready to host another episode of the show that had brought joy to millions of American families. The game started normally enough. The families exchanged pleasantries, the audience applauded, and the first few rounds went smoothly. But it was during the 4th question, when Sarah stepped up to the podium to face off against the Rodriguez family's captain, that everything changed. Steve asked the question with his usual flair. Name something you might find in a woman's purse. It was a straightforward question, the kind that had been asked on Family Feud dozens of times over the years. Sarah buzzed in first and answered confidently, lipstick. It was a perfectly reasonable answer. In fact, it was likely to be on the board. But before Steve could even turn to reveal whether it was there, David's voice rang out from his position at the family podium. Really, Sarah? That's the best you could come up with? I told you lipstick was too obvious. You never listened to me. The studio audience fell silent. Sarah's face flushed red and her shoulders hunched slightly as if trying to make herself smaller. Steve Harvey's smile faded and he turned slowly to look at David Thompson, but David was not done. ACT 3. The struggle for 12 minutes. Steve turned to reveal the answer, and there it was. Lipstick was the number 2 answer on the board with 28 points. The audience erupted in applause, but David's reaction was not what anyone expected. Instead of celebrating his wife's correct answer, he shook his head dismissively. Well, I guess even a broken clock is right twice a day, David muttered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. He laughed as if he had made a clever joke, but no one else was laughing. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, trying to maintain her composure on national television. Steve Harvey stood perfectly still at the podium. In his decades of hosting Family Feud, he had seen many things. He had seen families argue over answers, he had seen people get competitive, he had even seen some heated moments. But this was different. This was not about the game. This was about a man publicly humiliating his wife, the woman he had promised to love and cherish. The game continued, but David's behavior did not improve. When it was his turn at the podium, he made sure to glance back at Sarah with a smug expression before giving his answer. When his answer was wrong, he immediately blamed it on being distracted by Sarah's earlier mistake, even though she had been correct. During the huddle rounds, when the family had to confer on answers, David would cut Sarah off mid-sentence, telling her that her ideas were not helpful and that she should let the adults handle it. The Thompson children looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot and avoiding eye contact with their father. Sarah's sister placed a protective hand on Sarah's shoulder during one particularly harsh comment from David. The studio audience, which usually provided constant energy and encouragement, had grown noticeably quieter. Even the Rodriguez family, their competitors, looked disturbed by what they were witnessing. But the breaking point came during fast money. The Thompson family had won the main game, largely thanks to Sarah's correct answers, though David had made sure to take credit for their strategy. Now it was time for fast money, and Sarah had volunteered to go first. She needed to answer 5 questions in 20 seconds to set up a good score for David to build on. As Sarah stood at the podium, visibly nervous, David called out from backstage where he was waiting with noise-canceling headphones. "Try not to embarrass us, Sarah. Just answer quickly and maybe we can still salvage this." Steve Harvey had heard enough. He held up his hand to stop the proceedings and walked over to where David was standing. The audience held its breath, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Sir, I need to have a word with you," Steve said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. David looked confused, as if he genuinely could not understand why Steve was addressing him. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Steve looked directly into David's eyes. "Yes, there is a problem, and the problem is you." The studio fell completely silent. Even the production crew stopped what they were doing. This was not scripted. This was not part of the show. This was Steve Harvey, a man who had been married, who understood what real partnership looked like, refusing to let this moment pass without addressing it. "All day long, I've watched you talk down to your wife. I've heard you dismiss her, belittle her, and treat her like she's less than you. And I want you to know something right now. That woman standing over there, your wife, she deserves better than that. She deserves better than how you've been treating her on this stage today." David tried to interrupt, tried to laugh it off. "Steve, we're just joking around. Sarah knows I'm just playing. That's just how we are." Steve was not having it. "Look at her face. Does she look like she's in on the joke? Because from where I'm standing, she looks like a woman who's been putting up with this for a long time and she's tired." ACT 4, the turnaround, 12-16 minutes. Steve turned to address the entire studio audience and the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a moment here to talk about something important. We bring families on this show to have fun, to compete, to maybe win some money. But I'm not going to stand here and watch a man disrespect his wife on national television without saying something about it." He looked back at David. "Marriage is supposed to be a partnership. Your wife is supposed to be your equal, your partner, the person you build a life with. She's not your employee. She's not your child. She's not someone you get to talk down to because you think it makes you look smart or funny." The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then louder. Steve continued, his voice growing more passionate. "Every answer she gave today was correct. Every single one. She's been carrying your family through this game, and instead of supporting her, instead of celebrating her, you've been tearing her down. Why? What does that accomplish except making her feel small?" David's face had gone from confused to defensive to something else, something that might have been the first glimmer of shame. His children were watching him, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and something that looked like relief that someone had finally said what they had been thinking for years. Steve walked over to Sarah, who was standing at the fast money podium with tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears now. Not tears of humiliation, but tears of relief that someone had stood up for her, that her pain had been acknowledged. "Sarah, I want you to know something. You don't deserve to be treated that way. Not here, not at home, not anywhere. You are smart, you are capable, and you are worthy of respect. Do you understand me?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Steve continued, "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you want to continue with fast money? Because if you don't, we can stop right here. You don't owe anyone anything, not the show, not the audience, and certainly not him." Sarah took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than anyone expected. "I want to play. I want to show my children what it looks like to stand up and finish what you started, even when someone tries to break you down." The audience erupted in applause. Steve nodded with approval and walked back to his hosting position. "All right then, let's do this. Sarah, you ready?" Sarah stood straighter, lifted her chin, and said, "I'm ready." What happened next was remarkable. Steve asked the 5 fast money questions, and Sarah answered each one with confidence and clarity. Her voice did not waver. Her answers were thoughtful and strong. And when Steve revealed her score, she had earned 178 points, one of the highest individual fast money scores in recent Family Feud history. The studio went wild. Sarah's children rushed to hug her. Her sister was crying. Even the Rodriguez family was cheering for her, but David stood apart, watching, his face unreadable. Steve looked at David. "Your wife just scored 178 points. All you need is 22 points to win the $20,000, but before we bring you up here, I need to know something. Are you going to treat her with the respect she deserves? Because if not, we can end this right now." David walked slowly to the podium. For the first time all day, he looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and what he saw seemed to hit him. He saw the woman he had married 20 years ago, the woman who had stood by him through job losses and health scares, the woman who had raised his children and built a home. and he saw what his behavior had done to her. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Steve held up his hand. "Don't apologize to her right now, not here, not like this. This isn't about making yourself feel better with a quick sorry. This is about understanding that you have work to do, real work. On yourself, on how you treat the woman you claim to love. You understand?" David nodded, and for the first time he looked genuinely humbled. Steve proceeded with the fast money questions. David answered them mechanically without his earlier arrogance. When the board revealed his score, he had earned 85 points, bringing their total to 263 and winning the $20,000, but Steve did not celebrate the win in the usual way. Instead, he walked over to Sarah and handed her the oversized prize check. "This belongs to you. You earned it, every penny of it." ACT 5. The legacy 1620-plus minutes. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, it became an instant cultural moment. The clip of Steve Harvey confronting David Thompson was shared millions of times across social media, but the responses were not what everyone expected. While many people praised Steve for standing up for Sarah, the real conversation centered on something deeper. Thousands of women came forward to share their own stories of being talked down to by their husbands, of being made to feel small in their own marriages. Many said they had been living with this kind of treatment for years, thinking it was normal, thinking they had to accept it. Watching Steve call it out on national television gave them the courage to speak up in their own lives. But what surprised everyone the most was the number of men who reached out to say that watching the episode had been a wake-up call. Many admitted they had been behaving like David without realizing how damaging it was. They shared stories of apologizing to their wives, of committing to therapy, of working to change patterns they had fallen into over years of marriage. David Thompson himself gave an interview 2 months after the episode aired. He appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show and spoke candidly about what had happened. He admitted that watching himself on television had been one of the most painful experiences of his life. He said he had not realized how cruel his words sounded until he heard them played back. He talked about how he had grown up in a household where his father had treated his mother the same way, and how he had unconsciously repeated those patterns without questioning them. "I thought I was being funny," David said, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought the put-downs were just jokes that Sarah understood I didn't mean them, but jokes are supposed to make people laugh, and Sarah wasn't laughing. She hasn't been laughing for a long time, and I was too wrapped up in myself to notice." He revealed that after the taping, Sarah had told him that she needed space. She took the children and stayed with her sister for 2 weeks. During that time, David said he had to confront what his marriage had become and who he had become as a husband. He started individual therapy and couples counseling with Sarah. "Steve Harvey did me a favor that day," David said. "He held up a mirror and made me look at myself, and I didn't like what I saw, but it was the wake-up call I needed. I was losing my wife, the woman I love, because I had forgotten how to treat her like I love her." Sarah appeared on the show with him. She looked different from the woman who had stood on the Family Feud stage months earlier. She looked stronger, more confident, more at peace. She talked about how difficult it had been to be humiliated on national television, but also how necessary it had been. "For years, I told myself that David's behavior was just his personality, that I was being too sensitive, that I should be grateful he was a good provider and didn't drink or cheat. But being talked down to every day, being made to feel stupid in my own home, that's its own kind of abuse. It's just quieter. It doesn't leave bruises you can see." She said that when Steve stood up for her, it was the first time in years that someone had validated her feelings. It gave her the courage to set boundaries, to demand respect, to say that she deserved better. "I told David that if he wanted to save our marriage, things had to change. Not just words about change, but real, consistent, daily change in how he treats me. And to his credit, he's doing the work. It's hard. Some days are better than others, but he's trying, and I can see the difference." Steve Harvey, watching this conversation between David and Sarah, spoke about why he had intervened the way he did. "I have 3 daughters. I have a wife I love, and I'll be honest with you, there have been times in my life when I didn't treat the women I loved the way I should have. I've had to learn, I've had to grow, I've had to do better. But one thing I know for sure is that if you love someone, you lift them up. You don't tear them down." He continued, "When I saw what was happening on that stage, I had a choice. I could let it go, keep filming, not make waves. But then I thought about all the women watching who might be living with that same treatment every day. I thought about their daughters and sons watching and thinking that's what marriage is supposed to look like. And I knew I had to say something." The Thompson children also spoke publicly about the experience. Their eldest daughter, now 23, said that watching her father's behavior on television had been eye-opening. She admitted that she had started to accept similar treatment in her own relationship, thinking it was normal because she had seen it modeled in her parents' marriage. Seeing it called out publicly had made her realize she deserved better. My dad had to learn that lesson on national television in front of millions of people. That must have been so hard, but it probably saved my parents' marriage, and it definitely changed how I think about what I'll accept in my own relationships. The episode became required viewing in marriage counseling programs across the country. Therapists used it to help couples identify patterns of disrespect and contempt in their relationships. The American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy even invited Steve Harvey to speak at their annual conference about the importance of public figures addressing domestic emotional abuse. 1 year after the episode aired, Sarah and David Thompson appeared on Family Feud again, this time in a special couples episode. Steve Harvey welcomed them back with genuine warmth. The difference in their interaction was visible to everyone. David no longer interrupted Sarah. He listened when she spoke. He supported her answers instead of criticizing them. When they won that episode too, David immediately turned to Sarah and said, "You were amazing. I'm so proud to be your husband." Steve Harvey pulled them aside after the taping. "I want you to know how proud I am of both of you. David, you could have responded to what happened with anger and defensiveness. Instead, you did the hard work of looking at yourself and changing. That takes courage. Sarah, you stood up for yourself and demanded the respect you deserve. That takes even more courage. You're both showing people what real love looks like, the kind that's willing to do the hard work of growth and change." The money Sarah won from her first appearance on Family Feud, she donated half of it to a local domestic violence organization that helps women leaving emotionally abusive relationships. The other half she used to go back to school to complete her master's degree in library science, something she had put off for years because David had told her it was a waste of time and money. "That money represented my voice being heard, my worth being acknowledged. I wanted to use it to invest in myself and to help other women find their voices too," Sarah explained. The episode continues to be one of the most watched Family Feud episodes in the show's history. It sparked a national conversation about emotional abuse in marriage, about the ways that constant criticism and belittling can destroy a person's sense of self-worth, and about the responsibility all of us have to speak up when we see someone being mistreated. Marriage counselors report that after the episode aired, they saw a significant increase in couples seeking help, with many citing the Thompson episode as the reason they finally decided to address problems they had been ignoring for years. The episode became known in professional circles as a case study in how public accountability can sometimes be the catalyst for private change. Steve Harvey himself reflected on the experience in his memoir. He wrote, "People sometimes ask me if I regretted stopping the show to confront David Thompson. They ask if I was worried about the ratings or the sponsors or the backlash. But I never regretted it for a second. Because at the end of the day, I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror. I have to be able to tell my daughters that when I saw a woman being disrespected, I stood up for her. That matters more to me than any television show." The simple truth that emerged from that day on the Family Feud stage is one that resonates with people across all backgrounds and experiences. Respect is not optional in a marriage. Love without respect is not love at all. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold up a mirror and show them who they have become, giving them the chance to choose to be better. Sarah Thompson often speaks at women's groups now, sharing her story and encouraging others to recognize their own worth. She always ends with the same message. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect in your marriage, not just on good days or special occasions, but every single day. If the person who promised to love you makes you feel small, makes you doubt yourself, makes you feel like you're never good enough, that's not love. Real love builds you up. Real love celebrates you. Real love respects you. And if you're not getting that, it's okay to demand better. It's okay to walk away. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that marriage should be built on mutual respect and dignity, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better. Because change starts when we stop accepting disrespect as normal and start demanding the love and respect we all deserve. The day Steve Harvey stopped a game show to defend a woman's dignity became more than just a television moment. It became a turning point for thousands of marriages, a wake-up call for countless individuals, and a reminder that standing up for what is right is never the wrong thing to do, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it disrupts the show, even when it means calling someone out in front of millions of people. Because some things matter more than entertainment. Dignity matters, respect matters, and love, real love, always matters most.